The South African Broadcasting Corporation's Group Chief Executive Officer, Madoda Mxakwe's 5-year tenure comes to an end at the end of this month. Now, Mxakwe joined the SABC at a time when it was facing governance failures, corruption, gross mismanagement, and of course a crippling financial situation. And over the past 5 years, Mxakwe and his management team have worked closely with all employees and the board to reverse the dire situation, setting the public broadcaster on a recovery path and of course rebuilding its credibility. Madoda Mxakwe joins us now in studio to look back on his 5-year tenure and perhaps he'll let us in on his future endeavours as well. Mr. Mxakwe, good to have you. Good morning.
Good morning, SK. Thank you for having me.
I still remember the day when you joined us, but you know, the 5 years have gone by pretty speedily, would you say?
But it has been a very grueling 5 years. I was saying to you earlier, everything that could go wrong did in the past 5 years. You may recall we moved, we're jumping literally from one crisis to the other. Buildings burning, you had diesel spillage, we have had to deal with the commission on the sexual harassment, commission on news interference, the need to make sure that we are financially viable. So it's been a journey, I think, at a personal, professional level, very fulfilling. This is about country duty, really, not anything else.
Why did you take the job? Given that you would have heard all sorts of stories, you would have seen over the years that people hardly finished that 5-year tenure in this position. So why did you take it?
I think I was largely driven by the need to serve the nation. I think it's important for people to lend a helping hand, to play a role in the rebuilding of our country. So really at the heart of it was the importance of contribution to society and ensure we prioritize country duty. And
I look at the list of challenges that you've just mentioned, add to that COVID-19 and all of the disruption that brought about, add to that the Section 189 process and how difficult those times were at the SABC. And, you know, now that you're the outgoing CEO, I want to talk to you about that and exactly what you were going through at that moment, because those were hard times here on the shop floor.
You see, business schools normally teach about the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, but nothing would prepare anybody for this, because the SABC is really, for me, a personification of a VUCA world. Extremely complex, uncertain, and I think it even becomes more difficult when you inherit an organization that was systematically collapsed and hollowed out. And what we did working with the previous board and the team and all employees of the SABC was really to rebuild an institution that is very critical for our democracy. And I'm really, I must say, I would want to pay tribute to all of the hard-working, committed SABC employees that have stayed the course. Because despite all of these challenges, SK, not once were we not able to broadcast. Whether you're talking about radio or television, we were able to fulfill our mandate quite efficiently despite those challenges.
So over these 5 years, and despite what you were told and warned about stepping into the hot seat, what would you say is your biggest regret over the 5 years in terms of how things played out over that period?
It would not be regret. It would be more things that we could have done differently. In any turnaround plan, there are focus areas you want to look into. And one of the things, for example, I would have wanted us to do properly is more from a culture change management program, ensuring that some of our approaches are bottom-up, including the inputs from the various employees, because they actually know better. And I must say that humbly, our approach has always been to engage employees, understand how we should be doing to take the organization forward. But at the end of the day, you are the accounting authority and you are the accounting officer. You need to take the required decisions for the organization.
And the lessons learned, because I remember when you started, you had these, whether they were breakfasts or lunch, you know, these sessions that you had where you would invite various employees to come and have a word with you, just getting to know the people, getting to know the organization, its culture, etc. And I remember when I was in one of those, I said to you, SABC management is fundamentally dishonest. And I remember you asked me to repeat that, and you wrote it down.
Right.
And you asked me to explain what I meant by that. SABC management is fundamentally dishonest. Yeah. So in terms of that, and just looking at, you know, my engagement with you, what did that mean to you in terms of going forward in the organization?
I think we've gone through a lot of processes from a self-introspection point of view. And to your point, one of the things I've done in the past 5 years was to ensure that I bring across the divisions, various teams where we can sit, co-create the SABC for the future. And in that, it's natural, human beings will always raise issues that impact them individually or collectively. And ours was to take those inputs in and then go back to the various divisional managers and say, look, in your division, these are the issues that are being raised. Can you please thoughtfully look into these? But I think the second point to say lessons learned, it's you know, I'm from the private sector. I got into this thinking that there would be more agility and flexibility. The regulatory constraints, legislative impediments just made it difficult for us to be faster. And it actually affected our competitiveness because we are in an environment that is quite agile, and we couldn't be as agile compared to our competitors. But also the regulations, they were just slowing the SABC down, as it were.
And I think that segues nicely to the next question that I want to ask you in terms of those lessons learned, but also the advice that you would give in terms of how to make the SABC better from your 5 years. I'm sure there's a lot that you've learned. You speak of the agility, and this speaks not just to the legislative processes and, you know, processes that you need to undergo, but also in terms of how you manage talent, for example, in an organization like this.
Look, from a legislative point of view, I do think, I mean, you're literally running an entity that is still anchored in almost a 30-year policy, regulatory, and legislative framework. It's just not tenable. And the second thing with that is all of the licensing conditions. You may know this, about 48% of the television programming is geared towards the unfunded mandate. Literally, you cannot monetize 48% of the content. Radio, 15% of the radio inventory is geared towards the unfunded mandate. We get about 12 minutes in an hour for advertising, which is not the same with the other competitors. So all of these, and fortunately, I do know that the board, the previous board, and the ministry, they have helped us to put together the SABC bill. And that bill will really help unlock the value that reside in this institution. On the talent side, I think what has been difficult is the retention of key talent. Because again, we're operating in a very competitive world, and our competitors, when they want to come and get Sakina, we are a public broadcaster, they are more a private sector entity, they can break the bank to get you. And I think people like you stay at the SABC, not because they are motivated by any financial gains, but you stay here because you believe in the public mandate of the SABC. Again, it's a really country duty issue.
And Mr. Mxakwe knows that because he knows the mathematics around. But, you know, it has been a fabulous, 5 years from our side. Of course, we've butted heads along the way, but it's in the dynamic, in any viable and also just an organization like the SABC that is so big, that is so important to this country as the public broadcaster, those clashes are inevitable along the way. But I'm going to ask you, Mr. Mxakwe, just to stay put for a little while. Just want to get the headlines in, and then we'll wrap our conversation. But coming back to our conversation with the outgoing CEO of the SABC, Madoda Mxakwe, and literally counting the days now, Mr. Mxakwe. And, you know, just before going to headlines, we were talking about how dynamic organizations, you know, would have its moments of strife. We'd have our moments of triumph. I mean, I remember when the news division went to being the top on the news spectrum in terms of the news channels on a bouquet. So that, of course, must have been an immense moment for you to have presided over that, given that for years SABC News, for some reason, was lagging.
Yeah, I think back to your point about conflicts, you know, conflicts are inevitable. In fact, I dare say, you know, necessary in order for an organization to get to innovative solutions. My leadership style at the SABC has always been one of an open door policy. You engage, you express yourself, so that when we align going forward, we understand that everybody's inputs and opinions have been taken into account. And I think for me, it has really been, you talk about the news team, you've had so many wins, you know, whether it was about the manner in which you covered the elections. MMA, for example, would produce these incredible research and studies about the great work that is being done. And even over and above the news division, the stuff that is being done, for example, on our own OTT platform, SABC Plus, and just the resilience and the commitment of SABC employees. And I think for me, that was a huge motivator, to know that I'm working with people that really want to do this, and they're committed to our constitutional public mandate. It's just been incredible.
And it is, of course, highly, highly contested terrain.
Extremely.
Were you ever told to fire anybody?
No, never. I think for me, and I've said this in many platforms, the degree to which anybody can give you that instruction, it would have to be based on disrespect on you as an individual, but also how open are you as that leader to get that instructions. I was never, in my tenure here, I was never ever told to fire anyone.
Letter to whoever takes over as the group CEO of the SABC. So what would you say to the next person?
It's a labor of love. You know, it's you don't do this because you want to make money. You do it because you care and you're committed to rebuilding the SABC. But also you need to be open-minded, you know, be a good listener, be able to take into account inputs and opinions, because it's a very contested area. Everybody feels, and rightly so, that they own the SABC. So you need a leader that firstly would understand the importance of public broadcasting. You need a leader that's going to be very firm but empathetic. You also need a leader that's going to embrace different opinions from various stakeholders. And
the future?
Well, I want to go to my village in Ndlovukazi in Queenstown and reset, distress, and we'll take it from there.
Well, Mr. Madoda Mxakwe, it's been an honor, a privilege to have walked these 5 years with you. Thank you so much for the leadership style, for all the guidance that you've given over the years, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It all forms part of this experience. And let me say, you know, from myself, my personal experience and interaction with you, I appreciate you and thank you and wish you well for the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Second.
And that, of course, the outgoing Group CEO of the SABC, Madoda Mxakwe. And it's going to be interesting to see who fills this position next.